Chapter 3. The Method of the Kabbalah. 1. Speaking of the method of the Kabbalah, one of the ancient rabbis said that an angel coming down to earth would have to take on human form in order to converse with man. The curious symbol system known to us as the Tree of Life is an attempt to reduce to diagrammatic from every force and factor in a manifested universe and the soul of man, to correlate them one to another and reveal them spread out as on a map so that the relative positions of each unit can be seen and the relations between them traced. In brief, the Tree of Life is a compendium of science, psychology, philosophy, and theology. 2. The student of the Kabbalah goes to work in exactly the opposite way to the student of natural science. The latter builds up synthetic concepts, the former analyzes abstract concepts. It goes without saying, however, that before a concept can be analyzed, it must first be assembled. Someone must have thought out the principles that are resumed in the symbol, which is the object of meditation of the Kabbalists, who then were the first Kabbalists who built up the whole scheme. The rabbis are unanimous upon this point. They were angels. In other words, it was being of another order of creation than humanity who gave the chosen people their Kabbalah. 3. To the modern mind, this may seem as absurd a statement as the doctrine that babies are found under gooseberry bushes. But if we study the many mystical systems of comparative religion, we find that all the Illuminati are in agreement upon this point. All men and women who have had practical experience of the spiritual life tell us that they are taught by divine beings. We shall be very foolish if we altogether disregard such a cloud of witnesses, especially those of us who never have had any personal experience of the higher state of consciousness. 4. There are some psychologists who will tell us that angels of the Kabbalists and the gods and madness of other systems are our own repressed complexes. There are others with less limited outlook who will tell us that these divine beings are the latent capacities of our own higher selves. To the devotional mystic, this is not a point of any great moment. He gets his results, and that is all he cares about. But the philosophical mystic, in other words the occultist, thinks the matter out and arrives at certain conclusions. These conclusions, however, can only be understood when we know that we mean by reality and have a clear line of demarcation between the subjective and the objective. Anyone who is trained in philosophical method knows that this is asking a good deal. 5. The Indian schools of metaphysics have most elaborate and intricate systems of philosophy which attempt to define these ideas and render them thinkable. And though generations of seers have given their lives to the task, the concepts will still remain so abstract that it is only after a long course of discipline, called yoga in the East, that the mind is able to apprehend them at all. 6. The Kabbalist goes to work in a different way. He does not attempt to make the mind rise up on the wings of the metaphysics into the rarefied air of abstract reality. He formulates a concrete symbol that the eye can see, and let it represent the abstract reality that no untrained human mind can grasp. 7. It is exactly the same principle as algebra. Let x represent the unknown quantity, let y represent the half of x, and let z represent something we know. If we begin to experiment with y to find out its relation to z, and in what proportions, it soon ceases to be entirely unknown. We have learned something at any rate about it, and if we are sufficiently skillful, we may in the end be able to express in terms of Z, and then we shall begin to understand X. 8. There are a great many symbols which are used as objects of meditation: the cross in Christendom, the god forms in the Egyptian system, phallic symbols in other faiths. These symbols are used by the uninitiated as a means of concentrating the mind and introducing into it certain thoughts, calling up certain associated ideas, and stimulating certain feelings. The initiate, however, uses a symbol system differently. He uses it as an algebra by means of which he will read the secrets of unknown potencies. In other words, he uses the symbol as a means of guiding thoughts out into the unseen and incomprehensible. 9. And how does he do this? He does it by using a composite symbol. A symbol which is unattached unit would not serve his purpose. In contemplating such a composite symbol as the tree of life, he observes that there are definite relations between its parts. There are some parts of which he knows something, there are others of which he can intuit something, or more crudely make a guess, reasoning from first principles. The mind leaps from one known to another known, and in so doing traverses certain distance, metaphorically speaking. It is like a traveller in the desert who knows the situation of two oases and makes a forced march between them. He would never have dared to push out into the desert from the first oasis if he had not known the location of the second. But at the end of this journey, he not only knows much more about the characteristics of the second oasis, but he has also observed the country lying between them. Thus, making forced marches from oasis to oasis, backwards and forwards across the desert, he gradually explores it. Nevertheless, the desert is incapable of supporting life. 10. So it is with the kabbalistic system of notation. The things it renders are unthinkable, and yet the mind, tracking from symbol to symbol, manages to think about them. And although we have to be content to see in a glass darkly, yet we have every reason to hope that ultimately we shall see face to face, and even as we are known. For the human mind grows by exercise, and that which was at first as unthinkable as mathematics to the child who cannot manage his sums finally comes within the range of our realization. By thinking about a thing, we build concept of it. 11. It is said that thoughts grew out of language, not language out of thought. What words are to thoughts, symbols are to intuition. Curious as it may seem, the symbol precedes the elucidation. That is why we declare that Kabbalah is a growing system, not a historic monument. There is more to be got out of the Kabbalistic symbols today than there was in the time of the old dispensation, because our mental content is richer in ideas. How much more, for instance, does the Sephirah Yesod, wherein work the forces of growth and reproduction, mean to the biologist than to the ancient rabbi? Everything that has to do with growth and reproduction is resumed in the sphere of the moon. But this sphere, as represented upon the tree of life, is set about with paths leading to other Sephiroth. Therefore, the biological Kabbalist knows that there must be certain definite relationships between the forces subsumed in Yesod and those represented by the symbols assigned to these paths. Brooding over these symbols, he gets a glimpse of relationships that do not reveal themselves when the material aspect of things is considered. And when he comes to work these out in the material of his studies, he finds that therein are hidden important clues. And so upon the tree, one thing leads to another, explanation of hidden causes arising out of the proportions and relations of the various individual symbols composing this mighty synthetic glyph. 12. Each symbol, moreover, admits of interpretation upon the different plans, and through its astrological associations can be related to the gods of any pantheon, thus opening up vast new fields of implications in which the mind ranges endlessly, symbol leading on to symbol in an unbroken chain of associations, symbol confirming symbol, as the many branching threads gather themselves together into a synthetic life once more, and each symbol capable of interpretation in terms of whatever plane the mind may be functioning upon. 13. This mighty, all-embracing life of the soul of man and of the universe, by virtue of its logical association of symbols, evokes images in the mind. But these images are not randomly evolved, but follow along well-defined association tracks in the universal mind. The symbol of the tree is to the universal mind what the dream is to the individual ego. It is a glyph synthesized from subconsciousness to represent the hidden forces. 14th. The universe is really a thought form projected from the mind of God. The kabbalistic tree might be likened to a dream arising from the subconsciousness of God and dramatizing the subconscious content of deity. In other words, if the universe is the conscious end product of the mental activity of the logos, the tree is the symbolic representation of the raw material of the divine consciousness and of the processes whereby the universe came into being. 15th. But the tree applies not only to the macrocosm but also to the microcosm, which, as all occultists realize, is a replica in miniature. It is for this reason that divination is possible. That little understood and much maligned art has for its philosophical basis the system of correspondences represented by symbols. The correspondences between the soul of man and the universe are not arbitrary, but arise out of developmental identities. Certain aspects of consciousness were developed in response to certain phases of evolution, and therefore embody the same principles. Consequently, they react to the same influences. A man's soul is like a lagoon connected with the sea by submerged channel. Although to all outward seeming it is landlocked, nevertheless its water level rises and falls with the tide of the sea because of the hidden connection. So it is with human consciousness. There is a subconscious connection between each individual soul and the world soul deep hidden in the most primitive depths of subconsciousness, and in consequence we share the rise and falls of the cosmic tide. 16. Each symbol upon the tree represents a cosmic force or factor. When the mind concentrates upon it, it comes into touch with that force. In other words, a surface channel, a channel in consciousness, has been made between the conscious mind of the individual and a particular factor of the world soul. And through this channel the waters of the ocean pours into the lagoon. The aspirant who uses the tree as his meditation symbol establishes point by point the union between his soul and the world soul. This results in a tremendous access of energy to the individual soul, It is this which endows it with magical powers. 17. But just as the universe must be ruled by God, so must the many-sided soul of man be ruled by its God, the spirit of man. The higher self must dominate its universe, or there will be unbalanced force. Each factor will rule its own aspect, and they will war among themselves. Then do we have the rule of the kings of Edom. Those kingdoms are unbalanced force. 18. Thus do we see in the tree a life of the soul of man and the universe, and in the legends associated with its history of the evolution of the soul and the way of initiation.